A lot of people fear general AI, or what's known as true artificial intelligence. We're not talking about chatbots or algorithms that trawl through the internet for human content and then sort of regurgitate their own remixes or try to mimic human behavior. I'm talking about highly complex entities that are able to think, come up with abstract ideas, and most importantly have a sense of their own existence and mortality. Most people fear that one day machines, like the droids in Star Wars, will completely replace us. That one day these machines will see humanity as vile and evil, or perhaps even more terrifying and inconsequential. But perhaps that's just humanity projecting their own fear and cynicism on an entity that'll be far more advanced and intelligent than we can ever imagine. The reality is we don't have the capability of understanding what the world will be like in 5 years, let alone 50 years. But what I am certain of is those who keep an open mind and seek to understand advancements in technology will have a much better view of the future and where AI and automation will take us. And consequently, those are the individuals who also see the dangers and pitfalls in this technology first. Whereas those who give into their emotions and fear completely reject technology rather than understanding it. These are the individuals who will continue to fall behind and continue to misjudge what this technology actually is and what it's not. Master Yoda once said something about fear leading to hate, which leads to less limbs and toasty nutsacks. Don't lose your limbs. Don't get your precious kyber crystals all toasted. Have courage, and more importantly, fuel your curiosity. And in that spirit, tonight, I want to do a video that highlights a part of the Clone Wars we never focus on, and that is the lowly B-1 Battle Droid. The mechanical soldier so mistreated and disrespected that even its fellow droid soldiers won't think twice about harming them just because they seem to get in the way. The B-1 Battle Droids might seem silly, they might seem useless, and they are fighting for the wrong side of the war. But at the end of the day, they still are intelligent enough to fear their own demise. And so today, we'll be taking a look at the 10 saddest B-1 Battle Droid deaths in Star Wars. The clones and the droids had one big similarity that made them ideal cannon fodder for Palpatine's war. Both groups lacked advocates within their own factions. The clones had no representation within the Republic Senate, and the droids were, well, droids. It didn't really matter to either side how many of these units perish. Generally, war fatigue only sets in when the family and friends of deceased ones start to revolt or recruits refuse to go to service. Both the clones and the droids were isolated from the very people they were defending, which allowed the population to be shielded from the true cost of the conflict. So if the clones and the droids were relatively similar in their ability to insulate the war from the populace, then why did Palpatine give the Separatists droids? Well, it wasn't just the CIS's industrial capacity. That was important. But I believe Palpatine ultimately realized that if the Jedi were forced to cut down hundreds, if not thousands of clone troopers, they probably would have had some misgivings about the war and probably would have exited the war before Order 66 could be carried out. But since the Jedi were engaging droids, which had no presence in the Force, it was much easier for them to cut through giant swaths of them without any remorse or hesitation. And so during the Battle of Malachor, when the Grand Army of the Republic was in the process of testing a weapon known as the electroproton bomb, the Jedi were more or less okay with using this weapon. The electroproton bomb essentially created an EMP that took out all droid lifeforms and machines within its blast radius. This bomb had a pretty ridiculous blast range and instantly took out an entire droid army, wiping out tens of thousands of B-1 battle droids in a blink of an eye. It's probably the most feared weapon for all mechanical lifeforms, akin to a nuclear weapon for us organics. The Jedi were complicit in using this weapon and only regretted its use because it opened up a giant crater in the ground and revealed a giant monster known as the Zillo Beast. The Jedi ignored the termination of all these droids because at the end of the day, their force abilities were limited. They couldn't field droids using this energy field. But had there been a tech on the field that day that was plugged into the Separatist battle net, you probably would have sensed something quite traumatic. They probably would have registered a great deal of alarm and fear, especially from the rear ranks of battle droids as they saw everyone in front of them get engulfed in a chaotic ball of energy. Guys, have you ever wondered what a Lego lightsaber would look like if it were life-size and in real life? Well, thanks to our sponsor for today's video, Ownersaber.com, and you can now get your hands on an actual brick lightsaber. And as always, ownersaber.com has the finest craftsmanship on all of their metal hilts. This particular design is made out of high-quality aluminum, making the hilt extremely light, but also very durable. It also looks absolutely beautiful in person. Life-size yellow Lego claw hands are not included. But let's be honest, that's a risky operation and it just gives you diminishing returns. But luckily, you can still hold the brick lightsaber very comfortably with your normal human hands. And right now, all of the lightsabers at ownersaber.com, including the last brick, are 30% off and include free shipping. Check out the description down below for more information, and you guys can get an additional $15 off if you use our promo code EWOK, that's all caps. Thank you for your patience. On to the rest of the video. Organic soldiers need a lot of things to keep them going. Water, we need food, different types of gases and air, depending on your species. Droids, on the other hand, are pretty simple. They just need their batteries to be charged. When General Grievous's forces are defeated over the planet of Salakamai, he is forced to land on the planet with minimal resources and lacks backup batteries and generators to charge his droid escort, and himself. Luckily for Grievous, he finds some domesticated animals to carry his supplies, but he doesn't allow any of his B-1 Battle Droid escorts to ride on them. As a result, one by one, the B-1 Battle Droids begin to lose power and essentially die. To make matters worse, when one B-1 Battle Droid complains to Grievous, the cyborg general simply just cuts him down. This just showcases how difficult it was to be a B-1 Battle Droid. Not only was the entire clone army after them, even their own commander, General Grievous, did not care about their lives. The Clone Wars severely screwed up the galaxy, and one of the side effects of the Confederacy of Independent Systems' use of droids throughout the war was the creation of an extremely strong anti-droid sentiment, especially on the Outer Rim. Seen as indiscriminate killing machines, the Clone Wars created generational trauma towards droids, which would make life much crueler and tougher for all droids, not just the ones who fought for the Separatists.
We don't serve their kind here.
What?
Your droids. They'll have to wait outside. We don't want them here.
You're wasting your time. You can't reason with droids.
Their behavior is programmed. All they do is reason.
They're also programmed not to harm organics. How's that going?
Din Djarin was just one of millions of orphans who lost their parents to the droids during the Clone Wars. He generally is an open-minded and calm individual, but when he's around droids, he kinda loses it and starts getting a bit toxic. It's actually pretty funny to see. And things were no better in the core regions of the galaxy, mind you. The Republic spent most of the war creating propaganda against droids. And so after the Clone Wars ended, there were very few places in the galaxy that were actually safe for droids, especially Separatist battle droids. But the world of Plazir 15 was one of those havens.
Most of us have been refurbished and reprogrammed. The New Republic would send them to scrap. But here on Plazir, they are given a second chance.
But when a string of violent droid malfunction incidents began occurring on Plazir 15, the city had no choice but to hire Mando Dad and Bo-Katan Kryze to investigate the situation. Bo-Katan is a bit more clear-headed since her Death Watch tortured droids to death days, but Din Djarin still is as full of prejudice as ever. When the two arrive to an area where the next suspected droid malfunction was about to happen, Din Djarin just starts randomly kicking and attacking droids who are working in the area in order to provoke one to attack him. It's kind of a messed up strategy. Some might call it entrapment or just plain old assault. But in all fairness, it does work. And we're treated to almost a Blade Runner-esque style chase through Plazir 15 until finally the B-2 Battle Droid is destroyed.
Oh,
Recertified, huh?
you should have left them alone.
His only crime was being infected by some nanobots that were released by the chief of security on the planet in an attempt to destabilize the world. The situation doesn't really concern a B-1 Battle Droid, but once again, we see another Separatist droid veteran get used by an organic for their own selfish reasons. During the Ryloth campaign, the Confederacy of Independent Systems would utilize the local wildlife, including the terrifying gut cars, to repel the clone counter-invasion. This meant creating kennels to store the beasts, and these needed to be cleaned routinely. When the clones attacked this facility during the invasion, we see one battle droid on his knees cleaning a cage. Before he can do anything, his buddies quickly get taken out, and Obi-Wan Kenobi appears right behind him. Instead of destroying this droid, though, Obi-Wan Kenobi simply locks it inside of the cage it's cleaning. The whole situation is extremely humiliating for this droid, and worse yet, he's gonna probably have to wait there until his batteries completely drains. I'm pretty sure the clones are not going to release them anytime soon. When the Jedi and clones plan a rescue mission to the Citadel prison, they have to bypass extremely powerful sensors that scan for life forms on board of all shuttles granted access to the prison. In order to sneak into the facility successfully, the Jedi and clones must be frozen in carbonite and transported as prisoners. The entire success of this mission depends on 3 reprogrammed Separatist battle droids captured by the Republic. I'd like to think that one of these droids was the droid that was trapped in the cage I talked about before, and the other 2 just ran out of batteries on Select-Mai. But who knows? What is important here, though, is that all it takes is a new coat of paint and some new programming, and suddenly the B-1 Battle Droids are good guys. We as the audience begin to root for them because, in all honesty, they're very likable, but this also reveals the twisted and fake nature of this conflict. It's an orchestrated event by the Sith. Now, the B-1 Battle Droids still have that same goofiness they did when they were fighting for the Separatists, but you kind of get a sense that these droids now feel like they have a purpose, or perhaps it's just because the Republic and the Jedi treat their soldiers much better than leaders like Grievous. Unfortunately, these are still B-1 Battle Droids, and despite their brave attempt to keep up with their new masters, they get taken out along with most of the clone troopers as well. I really love this story arc. It's a glimpse of what could have been. Clones fighting alongside the droids against the real enemy, which would have been the Sith. Mr. Bones is a fan favorite for all who have read about him. It was the childhood project of New Republic ace Temmin Wexley. The droid was built out of the frame of a modified B-1 Battle Droid, but loaded to the teeth with all sorts of new combat protocols and programs and a murderous personality matrix that would make him immediate friends with HK-47. Mr. Bone also had an upgraded chassis, servos, joints, and motors. Weapons modifications were bolted all over his body. Mr. Bones was probably the deadliest B-1 Battle Droid to ever exist, and he was also one of the most loyal droid companions a young boy could have. By the end of the Galactic Civil War, he had killed scores of stormtroopers, thugs, usually in extremely violent and at the same time creative ways, although he really preferred carving up meat bags with his vibroblade. Actually, meat bag is kind of a term that HK-47 would use. Mr. Bones liked to call his victims meat paste. It's a little bit more violent, I guess. Now, Mr. Bones would meet his end in the way that he'd probably want to, defending his master, Temmin. During the Battle of Jakku, Temmin's X-Wing had been downed by falling debris from the sky. It was a really busy battle. Right before the young boy is killed by a group of sand troopers and an AT-ST walker, Mr. Bones arrives right in time and takes out the sand troopers, and he even hijacks the AT-ST walker. He emerges out of that bloody mess covered in blood and wearing the goggles of the Imperial driver that was, piloting the vessel. At which point, Temmin tells Mr. Bones that he misses him, and Mr. Bones says, "I miss you, I create violence." At which point, 2 A-Wings come out of nowhere and blow him up in a friendly fire incident. Thanks to Mr. Bones' sacrifice, Temmin Wexley would survive the Battle of Jakku. As a teenager, he would become a great pilot for the Resistance, and he would play a huge role in the destruction of Starkiller Base. Temmin Wexley would ultimately perish moments before the reinforcements arrived during the Battle of Exegol. During a small ceremony where his fellow pilots memorialized him, one of his co-pilots tosses a memory chip with Mr. Bones' code into the fire. See, Temmin had carried his buddy with him all those years, even after his body was destroyed. Temmin even brought him back to life once by inserting him into other droid bodies, including an old commando droid. So that kind of is the beauty of being a droid. They can't really become one with the Force, but you could upload them to the cloud. When fighting against droids, Clone Force 99 made short work of every enemy force that dared challenge them. But no one enjoyed killing droids more than Wrecker, the heavy in the unit, and his favorite method for destruction was using his bare hands.
Honestly, feel bad for those droids.
During the Battle of Anaxes, while pinned down on board a Separatist ship, Wrecker discards his weapon and goes on a melee killing streak. He chews through multiple Separatist droids like they're nothing, and it's such a terrifying sight that by the time he gets to the last B-1 Battle Droid, it's hardly able to function and shaking with fear. Having witnessed the death of so many of his brethren, the B-1 begs for his life, before getting his head smashed clean off. Now, if Wrecker had done that to a Separatist farmer who, enlisted in the CIS army, I think the Bad Batch show would have taken a very different tone. Mace Windu, or as I like to call him, Droid Bane, once destroyed an entire field of B-2 battle droids with nothing more than his bare fist and surliness. He also once got a jump on an entire room of battle droids. Instead of pressing his advantage, he proceeds to give them this amazing speech demanding that they surrender to him.
My name is General Mace Windu of the Jedi Order. I'm giving you an opportunity to peacefully lay down your weapons.
Now, you could say that Mace Windu was just way too arrogant by this time of the Clone Wars. But honestly, what I see here is a man who's become so used to killing droids, it's just become like a game to him, which is exactly what Palpatine wanted. Not surprisingly, the droids don't listen to Mace Windu's request and immediately open fire on him and the clones, but shortly after, a group of clone commandos manage to send a feedback pulse into the droid battle net, which causes all the B-1 battle droids in the room to fry their circuits one by one. Yes, great job, Clone Force 99, but this is absolutely terrifying for these droids who have no idea what's going on as one by one their brethren start to electrify themselves and collapse all around them. The end of the Clone Wars happened in a blur. Thousands of Jedi were wiped from the galaxy in a second, sending a shockwave through the Force. The Republic collapses and Sheev Palpatine rises as its new Emperor. The Separatist High Council mysteriously all end up deaded shortly after. And then Darth Vader transmits a signal and essentially destroys the entire droid army. Perhaps one of the largest acts of technocide in Star Wars history. Now, no one really remembers that part of the story because at the end of the day, organic life is more important than machine life. And, you know, it honestly should be that way. I think that's fine. There's an obvious hierarchy in what life is more important. Humanity first, other sentient species, droids, animals next, and dolphins last. But just because there's a hierarchy doesn't mean we can't have empathy for every group, including the droids. These poor bastards did nothing but suffer throughout the entire war and ultimately met the fate they feared more than anything else, to be turned off. There's a silver lining to all of this. Many years later, two young Jedi and an old clone by the name of Captain Rex ended up on an old Separatist munitions base. They were looking for some supplies for the Rebel Alliance they now served. They're surprised to find that the base is actually occupied by scores and scores of battle droids. It turned out this system, Agamar, had received the shutdown signal like everyone else, but the super tactical droid in charge, Kalani, believed it all to be a Republic Jedi ruse. And so for decades, Kalani had maintained a vigilant watch over his base, while trying to maintain a shrinking army as a lack of spare parts and general wear and tear started eating into his numbers. The rebels and droids battle, and Captain Rex is taken back to another part of his life. It's hard for the old clone to not hate droids. After all, so many of Rex's friends had their lives taken away by them. But ultimately, a greater foe arrives, the Empire, and the droids and clones must drop their differences and stand together for the first time, and probably for the last time as well. What is interesting, however, is the dynamic between the B-1 battle droids and the stormtroopers when they arrive. The B-1 battle droids are actually really polite.
Is that what I think it is?
Greetings. I am Unit B-1268. My commander has sent me
Yeah,
to report
Clone Wars
your
battle droid.
intentions.
Surprised its battery hasn't run out.
The stark difference between these two groups is a reminder that the Empire was the real thing, a tyrannical, galaxy-wide government, and the Separatist droid army, well, they were just a military force for a puppet government. The droids in that squad are ultimately helpless and get gunned down and crushed by the arrival of a walker. It's quite sad. But eventually, the droids and the rebels team together and they halt the stormtroopers' advance. It's a small bit of justice done for all those droids and clones who spent so much of their blood and oil trying to kill each other during the Clone Wars. You know, I still love the clone troopers, but there are a lot of videos about the clones and how much they suffered, and I think we've given a lot of time to that on this channel, so I'm really happy that we could finally look at the B-1 battle droids and kind of the crappy situation they've been put through as well. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below. My name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy.